Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the State Library of Queensland. My name is Vicky McDonald, and it's my great privilege to be the State Librarian and CEO of this fantastic library. And as some of you will know, it's International Digital Inclusion Week, and so it's an extra warm welcome to those who are joining us on Facebook Live and via the stream on our website this evening. So just not people in the audience here, but also nationally across Australia. So we're very thrilled to have people joining us as well. But let me begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay respects to the ancestors who came before them. The State Library of Queensland is located on Kirilpa Point, which is a traditional meeting, gathering and sharing place for Aboriginal people, and we're very proud to continue that tradition today and every day of the year. Also, in welcoming you, I would like to say Gumba Daru, Gumba Nanigia Nindu, which is good day, it's good to see you, and that's in Burragum, which is the language of the community that I grew up on the Darling Downs. And here at the State Library, we do a lot of work to collect, preserve and make accessible traditional languages, and we'll certainly do a lot more of that in the coming 12 months because 2019 is the International Year of Indigenous Languages, so you'll hear more languages in the coming 12 months. I'd also like to acknowledge and welcome our event partner, the ABC, and in particular tonight's facilitator, ABC Radio Brisbane presenter Loretta Ryan, and also our four panellists who will be sharing their stories and insight with us today. Professor Jeffrey Brand, Elizabeth Hughes, Dr. Deb Paulson, and Yin Tran. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, certainly, as I said, fantastic to see all of you here this evening. When you live in a place as beautiful as Queensland, lifestyle is certainly important, and brightly coloured towels, broad brim hats, sunscreen have often filled our beach bags and also our vernacular. But we are increasingly swapping our sunscreen for screen time, and it's changing the way that we work and play. And this seismic shift is explored in State Library's collections, our events and our programming, both here at South Bank and on our websites online. Our exhibition, Lifestyle, A Sunshine State of Mind, examines this constant quest for meaning and connection, and you may have already seen it in the SLQ gallery as you arrived this evening. Rare and restricted collection items such as iconic tourism posters and an historic homestead logbook provide insight into our collective past. And we've also had program ambassadors like Nicole Gibson and Tim Sharp who've helped to illuminate and interpret our past and our present. The home movies that you saw this evening before we started are just some of the State Library treasures that we have featured in the Lifestyle exhibition, and that exhibition actually closes this week, so do take the time to have a look at it. We'll keep the galleries open this evening so that you can have a look, but of course you can also jump online at our website to have a look as well. As you and in case you have a secret fascination for tire swans and concrete gnomes, we also have an exhibition that you're going to love as well. So that's all more Queenslandiana. In the 1960s and 70s, there was a husband and wife team, and they rode the suburbs of Queensland and also southeast Queensland, photographing about over 60,000 homes. And the people inside those homes didn't know they were being photographed. It was a husband and wife team, Frank and Eunice Cawley. Frank drove the pink Cadillac and Eunice was in the caravan that he was towing, and she was busy developing the films. They then turned those films into photographs and trying to sell them to the people in the homes, calendars and those sorts of things. So it's certainly a very unique perspective of Queensland in the 60s and 70s. The good news is that we have that collection, over 60,000 photos, and it's certainly a really interesting tale and gives you, as I said, insight into the past. And we will be showcasing that in our exhibition Home, A Suburban Obsession, which opens in the first week of December. So we certainly invite you to come back. But back to what we're about to talk about tonight. So tonight we're going to hear insights from a panel of highly regarded Queenslanders on what our lifestyle looks like in the digital age. They will explore the impact technology has had on the way we play, health and our well-being. Are we sun seekers in desperate need of a digital detox? Or as panellist Professor Brand said at a recent conference on the Gold Coast, do we see opportunity in disruption? As with everything we do at the State Library of Queensland and particularly in Queenslanders in Conversation, it's much richer if you participate. So we invite you to join the conversation. The hashtag that we're using tonight is SLQConvo, so SLQCONVO. And it's also being recorded and live streamed. So just be aware of that if you're asking questions at the end. And you can also leave through the back if you need to leave earlier. But for now, I'll hand over to our facilitator, Loretta Rice. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you all for coming tonight as well. Have some of you been through the lifestyle exhibition already? Fabulous, isn't it? So do go and have a look at that if you can tonight. As Vicky said, it will stay open. Now, have you checked in? Isn't that what you're supposed to do on social media and technology? Yes. It's funny, isn't it? We can't go anywhere without our phones these days. And I remember the good old days when there was a phone box down the road and you used to go down there. Or when we first got our phone at home. And it was a novelty. The phone would ring, you'd sit there waiting for it, and then we'd run to the phone to answer it because we wanted to be the first one to find out who was on the phone. Nowadays, the phone rings, you look at it, and you decide, I don't want to talk to that person, so you don't answer it. But so many things we can do with our phones now, and looking at those old photos as well, fabulous. Remember, we used to have the book, the photo album with the black pages and the little things that you'd stick them with, the little triangle things on the corner. Yeah, it's going back, isn't it? Now, I reckon I've got about 2,000 or more photos on my phone that I don't look at. So things have changed. Have they changed for the better? Have they changed us? That's what we're talking about tonight. Screens or sunshine, is technology changing the Queensland lifestyle? I think we've all talked about that in the past. I mean, there's no doubt that technology is a great thing. We've had so many advances in medical technology, science. It's certainly saved people's lives. But is technology slowly killing us? I'm going to ask our panel. I'm going to introduce each one of them and read you a little bit about them. I might sit down and I'll have to put my glasses on. Okay, because technology hasn't fixed my eyes up. Firstly, Professor Jeff Brand. Jeff is an academic working in communication and media. In his research, he looks at the behaviours, attitudes and demographics of audiences relating to digital technology, video games and entertainment, including the ongoing Digital Australia report. He is Professor, Communication and Creative Media and Associate Dean, Learning and Teaching at Bond University. Please make Jeff welcome. Jeff, can you come? Next up, we have Elizabeth Hughes. You can sit anywhere you like. You don't have to sit next to me. What did I do? Okay. Elizabeth Hughes is a digital wellness campaigner and social entrepreneur dedicated to helping people develop a healthy relationship with technology. She established the Mindful Executive in 2015 and co-created Digital Detox Project in 2016 and works with individuals, families and workplaces. And she hosts unplugged camps and writes on the topic of digital wellness. Please make Elizabeth welcome. Next, Dr. Deb Paulson. Deb Paulson is an independent designer and senior academic. Her work exploits unique aspects of technology such as computer games, mobile devices and digital social networks to imagine the future of human experience. She has worked in game design and academia for over 20 years in Australia, China, the US and the UK. She is the founder and director of Hub Studio and lectures in interactive and visual design at Queensland University of Technology. And Deb worked on the screen technology used in the Marvel Creating the Cinematic Universe exhibition at the Queensland Art Gallery. Come on up Deb. And next, Yen Trin. Yen is an urbanist, designer and strategist from Brisbane. She's passionate about public spaces and community building, and she has worked for design firms, museums, non-profits and government in Australia, Toronto and New York, and enjoys bringing creative thinking to placemaking and experience design. And Yen has most recently worked on the Gold Coast as part of the Commonwealth Games, and it is Yen's birthday. Thank you all for coming. I want to start off, though, by asking each of you your own personal relationship with technology. What is it? We might start with you, Professor.
Well, it's a big question, isn't it? I mean, Loretta, I guess my I teach classes on technology, classes called Digital Media and Society, and I guess I've always thought that technology had to be electronic or digital until I started thinking it through, and I thought, well, if we strip back everything around us, there is nothing much left in our experience that isn't a piece of technology. From the glasses we wear so that we can read, or the clothing that we wear, everything around us is an artifact of our making. And so I guess my relationship with technology is that I think it is socially constructed. I don't think it does things necessarily to us. I think we do things with it, but of course it can have unintended consequences. So I might park it there, but I am a computer geek. I love machines. I love cars. I love devices. And unfortunately, I have to say, like Siri. I don't love her, but I like Siri.
She's a Queenslander.
I know that. And when I go overseas, I keep the Queenslander voice.
All right, we'll move on to Deb and just get your personal relationship with technology, your habits.
I can probably sum it up with one fact, and that is I currently have 37,495 unread emails.
No.
No kidding.
What? Just delete.
Yeah, and every time I say that to someone, they've got a solution for me. Well, have you tried? But is that all like just bad like emails? Is that just like, it's not. It's actually like emails. And so, yeah, that's kind of almost my anxiety relationship with technology. Even though I kind of work with a lab where people come in and the first thing you see is technology, and people assume that I have a love of technology. I actually have a love of how people interact and human behaviour, and especially their relationship to place and specific places, like how it's different in museums, from hospitals, from classrooms to parks. So I'm really interested in that, and really the technology is just, well, why look at that relationship if you're not looking at what the emerging relationships are going to be? So that's kind of my relationship with technology, is it allows me to explore the future in some ways, but also with an eye on what's come and what's past and why we behave the way we do and why we might have 37,000 unread emails that keep us awake at night.
And we will look further at that, particularly the future. Elizabeth, as a wellness educator, your own relationship with technology.
Interesting question, and one I usually ask others. So I would probably describe it as measured. Would be the way I describe it. And the reason I say that is that we really need to work with technology in the environments that we live in for the best part. It's not something we can't go and sit in a cave and actually still, potentially earn a living and raise a family and all these sorts of things. So it really is very much relationship with technology is simply, how does it actually align and add value to the rest of my life, and how can I best use it to do those things that are important to me.
And Yen, what about yourself? Your habits, your relationship with technology, love it, hate it?
I think I love it, but I don't think that's been on purpose. Like I've on the computer every day. I've got a phone, I've got email, I use GPS to get here, and sometimes you're not aware that you're even using it. So I think it's probably more in my life than I realise, actually, now that I think about it.
Have we been forced to work with technology? I think most of us, maybe, remember a time when we didn't have as much technology as we do, and you look back and the phones were bigger too. We were talking about phones, and then everything went smaller, and then I remember working with a computer that had a big, didn't they call those big things floppy disks? But then they all changed. So it's evolved, but have we evolved with it, Professor?
Well, I actually think that we're groomed, and I think that's a frightening thought. But, if you think about your own experience with technology, and the first time you played with something electronic, it was a curiosity, and you looked at the affordances, what it could do or not do, more likely, and then you would start to think, well, this is kind of fun. And then you're kind of co-opted into finding fun and to playing with the technology, and pretty soon it's required at work anyway. And so then you've got to adapt and adopt, and I think we are groomed. That in a way that we're not always aware. And I agree with Yen. It's surprising when you realise, actually, I'm dependent on this.
Well, if we're dependent, though, and Elizabeth, you could probably answer this, that's not good for us if we're depending on technology or depending on these things.
Well, I guess it's it's still a tool, and it's still technology, and it's whether we're using it in a way that's actually helpful for us, or whether it's not. And so I think the key thing is less around the dependence, but more around really being able to understand how we're using it, why we're using it, and whether or not that's actually good for us or not. So it's actually raising our awareness around when we feel that we might be dependent, and then being able to make some choices around that.
Tonight we're discussing the Queensland lifestyle and whether our lifestyle has changed because of technology. Yen, you're involved in urban design and what happens in communities. So has the Queensland way of life changed because of technology?
I think it definitely has changed how cities are planned and how people experience them. Though I was reflecting on that. I was recently working on the Commonwealth Games, where also the really low-tech stuff is what visitors loved. It was a fiberglass koala that didn't do anything fancy, but you kind of, I guess you were trying to build this Instagram moment where you were taking photos of it maybe, but as an object, it wasn't high-tech at all. But then you see what amazing technology does to cities about, it makes things like they can program all the traffic lights in the CBD to make everything flow better, and pedestrians walk a certain way, and all that as well. So
Is that what's going to happen in our cities of the future then? Are we going to evolve with this technology? I saw something in the paper just yesterday about, making this CBD utopia. Is that what we're going to see?
Well, I think so. I think at the moment there's quite a lot of talk around the smart city concept, and it's really, I think, about how cities use data. So we're already doing it. We've got parking meters that will tell when it's over time. They're talking about doing that for bins, so they know when it's full, and that's all our public transport is about, all the go-karts and everything is already sort of linked. I think the smart city movement is really about how do we do that better and how we're linking things. But also, I guess my experience working in the local government is there's so much data and mapping and all kinds of stuff that sometimes we're a bit overwhelmed at how we're actually using it, and we don't actually even use it smart enough sometimes. Like, I did lots of signs for Commonwealth Games, and so the idea was that we could map them and we could check on them and we could say which ones we've checked all on this GIS system. But at the end of the day, we just needed to make it happen, and it happened based on paper. So, it's also, systems are great, but you need to have the culture and the governance and the people behind it to make it work, actually. So that's probably my thing with cities, is that we've probably got it, we're just probably not using it how we're using it. I don't think governments and communities are quite there yet with it.
Okay. Deb, you lecture at QUT. What is it that students are most excited about with technology?
They're excited by everything. I mean, I'm still impressed by sticky tape. So, everything impresses me. It's really interesting because I run a design capstone unit, but we work with industry, and one of our industry partners at the moment own 50% of the buildings in the CBD, and they talk about burning platforms, and they say that a platform's either solid, smouldering, or burning, and they say burning is retail, right? So one of the issues that they come to us with is, well, you are students who work with technology. What is a sort of a hybrid solution that's about what's the experience that people still want in retail and in the city? And the Brisbane Mall is the busiest mall in Australia, by far. By far the most successful mall in the whole of Australia. So we have a particular culture in Queensland that's kind of, I guess it's because for all sorts of reasons, how it's nice and centralised, it's nice and shaded, there's lots of great things about the mall. But the interesting response to that with students is they go straight to the technology first and go, well, how will I use it? So the answer for them is, how will I use VR, or how will I use AR? Or how will I use an app, or how will I do this? And it takes a while to kind of go, well, let's actually analyse the space and humans and people and look at what's currently happening, how we can either add to that. But my approach to that is what I call DESFi. You know how there's sci-fi? You think of the future and you tell stories about it. Well, I think about the future and try to prototype it. So it's a good way of getting them to think of, well, what might this be in 5 years' time or 10 years' time? And that way they have to kind of give up on the latest and actually think about human behaviour and what people want to do and might want to do, and have to come at it at that approach. And it's fascinating. They actually, I can't believe how many of them, one of the solutions to, because our brief from the people who own all the buildings, who do regional development as well, was how do we go from a shopping centre to a community heart? And they're looking at, all they want from our students is they don't want to know what's going to make money, they don't want to hear any bing bing, or what do they call it, ding ding, I can't. They just want to know what might be the social value or the cultural value, how do you engage people, how does it become a place people want to be, and then we'll sort the stuff out. Because they've realised that, you sort the other stuff out later. Give it value and then sort the stuff out later. And some of the solutions have actually been things like community gardens and a tree. You know, like, so it's really interesting how the relationship, but at the same time they've come to the students because those students will be the future, and their relationships with technology are very important, and how they're going to evolve and how much they value technology is valid. So those things have to be also considered. So it's kind of an interesting place to be.
What is that saying, though, that people are saying they want a community garden? They want those places. I mean, you know, we're looking at the Queensland lifestyle, sun, surf, being outdoors, but technology is taking us indoors. You know, we've got our heads in our screens. So that has to be saying we want more outdoors, but we're being forced into technology. So is it a damaging thing at the moment for our lifestyle?
For me, I mean, a lot of researchers in the area concentrate on the impacts and possible consequences of new technologies. And I'm interested in that same sort of science fiction way of the decisions we make now will have consequences, right? So I'm kind of interested in that. But at the same time, I think the reason why they were thinking of community gardens was more this thing about community being local. So actual community is local, but technological can be proximity free. So how do you then, so when they came up with the community garden, they also came up with the digital component of that, right? So what is you have your garden, but you also have your Tamagotchi garden with you, right? So by taking care of, this Tamagotchi is letting you know how healthy your garden is, so you're always checking in with it. And so it's almost like this thing is, it's capturing people who both care about the garden, the actual plant, and people who might care more about the digital plant, and that's the motivation to take care of it. So it's this hybrid relationship between the remote interaction with that garden and the actual relationship with that garden. But also, if a garden can only have really 5 people taking care of it, how do you get 5,000 interested in it? So that you use the kind of the network and the technologies to actually engage people more with caring about that. And so they've done this thing where they've gone from the garbage or the leftovers from the workers in a community used in a compost in the garden, which then grows food for the soup for the homeless. So they're doing this thing like from garbage to soup, which sounds terrible. I told them to change the name. So, but I think it's a thing of the sort of hybridity of the digital and the physical. But the good thing about these clients is they're actually looking at how do you still keep people together in place and keep that value going.
Jeff, you video games and entertainment is the focus of your work, and you were involved in the Digital Australia Report 2018, where you looked at how and why people play video games. What did you find out?
Well, Loretta, we've been actually doing that research since 2005, so we've done it 7 times. We're actually in the process of preparing for, would you believe, Digital Australia 2020. And what this is it's 1,200 households across Australia, and of course a representative sample of Queenslanders. And one of the things that we're very interested in is observing the fact that we've been playing games for quite a long time, and Australians, as everyone in the room knows, we pick up technology fairly readily as consumers. We like the latest gadgets. But we've gone from below 50% of the population when we first started this research back in 2005 playing video games to now 67%. And of course, yes, all of the expectations and stereotypes we have around video games are that younger people play them more than older people. But would you believe that after the age of 45, women start outstripping men in their use of video games? So video games are this elastic, enormously popular set of technologies. They're built here in Queensland by really great developers and right across Australia. And what we've found is that people play video games for a variety of different reasons. So there's this set of ideas about why we use media at all, why we watch television or watch movies or read books. And it's called uses and gratifications. It's a very simple paradigm. It says that there's a cost-benefit relationship that we build with our technologies. And so most people play video games, great big surprise, to escape, to be entertained. But as we age, that changes. We actually start playing video games, and I'm doing it myself with a game called Lumosity, for brain training. Right? We play video games to keep our minds active. And importantly, it is actually geolocated, so I can actually play against everyone else on the Gold Coast, which is really great fun.
But you don't know those people personally.
No.
You haven't got a relationship with them.
But what's really great, Loretta, is at the coffee shop in Burleigh, I can have a chat, or I see somebody playing the game and say, I play that too, but I wait until they're finished their little round. So video games are really extensible.
It's like that Candy Crush. Did people play that thing?
Yeah.
What? Oh, sorry. I only want to know. But what is it? What is it about those things that attract people?
Well, I think the playground is always open, for one thing. If you don't have somebody to play with and you can't be social at the moment, you can certainly pick up a computer and be social with it. I agree that sounds a bit dystopian.
Something else.
But there's also, a lot of adults that we talk to here in Queensland tell us that they're playing, older adults say they're playing to actually connect with people as well. So Words with Friends might be a way, but right, your favourite? It's a great game, and it's very social.
How many people play those things? Hands up. Words
We're just
with
doing video
friends, or
games?
Read your email instead of playing the game.
yeah, good. That's a good call. Good call. Elizabeth, I want to ask you then about those type of things, video games. Can they help our mental, well-being? Because you speak to a lot of people who want to detox from digital. So tell me what those people are telling you.
So I guess coming back to why they play it in the first place is quite often it's to do with that opportunity to improve something, to develop a level of mastery about no matter what it might be, even if it is Candy Crush. So you're wanting to develop that level of mastery, you get an opportunity to be autonomous. So you're actually something that you're doing on your own, or you can also, it's about connecting with other people. So quite often people are playing games because there's some really basic human needs that are actually being fulfilled as part of playing the game. So for those people that are actually looking, to say, hey, look, I'm really struggling with this a little bit, or like, no adults ever struggle with it. It's always the kids, by the way. No, but I'm being facetious.
Oh yeah, yes, of course.
So yeah, because quite often I'll we'll talk about the digital detox, and it'll be in one sentence it will be, oh, can I have some of that? And then the next sentence it will be, now I really want you to talk to my kids, So because that's where all our challenges sit around, particularly conflict in the household. But there's people are really sort of looking to understand what other opportunities, or firstly, why are they doing it? Well, what's the habits around it? And then where are there opportunities to actually either not, make a space and change the habit, or actually look at what else they can do, with that time and fulfill that need in a different way. So there's a whole range of things that go with that.
So how do you make them change the habit? And also, if we think that a little bit of technology is it's good for us,
yes.
it's positive.
Yeah.
So how do you make them change the habit to get the positive benefits?
So there is, there's definitely some new research out just recently around, that there is a point, particularly with teenagers or younger people, where it can, some technology can be a good thing, in terms of even in terms of wellness. So there is some of that research out now. So it really is very much understanding, what point, there'll be statistics that will come out, a lot more research over time that will come out around, how much technology of what type is actually okay for you. So we're still getting our head around that. So then, for now we can use some of those guidelines, but then the rest of it is really just understanding what works for us and what doesn't. When we actually get off the social media site, how do we actually feel? Has the last, 10 minutes or 20 minutes or however longer it might be of scrolling and liking or doing whatever we're doing, how we're actually feeling when we're getting off that site, and is that actually really making us feel good about ourselves, about our community, or are we actually feeling a little bit down and a bit anxious about things. So quite often it's the first piece is just understanding the impact that it's having on you or your family, and then from that point, seeing what the triggers are. Understanding the routine that goes with those habits, and then looking at the reward, which is what I started with, is actually what is it that people are getting the payoff? Like, what are we getting from actually doing this? And when we start to unpack these things, then we start to get a clearer way forward in terms of the things that we do need to do to actually break those habits for us. And I think the important thing around technology is that it's, while we've got, we're talking about stereotypes and all that sort of stuff, it's an individual thing. We can talk about stereotypes and, and that sort of thing. But then at the end of the day, it comes down to our own direct experience and what works for us and what simply doesn't.
Yeah, no, in terms of designing a suburb, a city, all those types of things, when we were kids, we'd go down to the park and play. Now I think it's hard to get the kids to go down the park and play or to get out in the yard because you've got to drag them away from the screens. Is there a big focus still on open space to get people out there?
Yeah, I think cities haven't really changed their policies around open space, but I think you're seeing slightly different add-ons to public space that you haven't seen before. So I remember seeing like a street furniture crew doing like the future bench, and it has, somewhere you can charge your device on. But a seat in a park is still always important. What that seat
That's
looks
for
like
mum and
might
dad
be
to charge their phones while the kids are playing.
Yeah, it might be different. But I think there's fundamental things about, the community garden, green space that I don't think will ever change. And I don't think I don't see us getting to the point where we're not going to need parks and those sort of things. So I think that will always be on the agenda. But I think, when we're looking at something like the Queen Street Mall or something, I think you'll be seeing Wi-Fi being important, mobile, 5G network being important. People's expectations of what they can have in that space might be different. But I think fundamentally those spaces will always be there, will have to always be there.
I'd agree, and I think that the intersection between technology and the urban environment is actually becoming one of the most interesting spaces for current social integration. Take Pokemon Go. You'd expect me to bring that up, but I mean, it was the most bizarre experience when Pokemon Go was released. I live in a leafy, lovely suburb on the Gold Coast called Mermaid Waters, and no one's in the park ever. And then all of a sudden, everybody was in the park. Everybody was out in the open on bikes talking. Of course, they had their faces in their smartphones. But it was an interesting thing that we could actually be mobile and playing and hybridize the screen and the lived environment. And the parks there are beautiful. So why not get people out in them? And I would agree completely that there is a limited amount of time we probably should be spending on screens. For young people, it's 2 hours. That's what most of the research says. But why not turn that 2 hours into a social 2 hours, find those affordances and opportunities. And I think that's, given that we're living in more tightly populated urban spaces, we should really be looking for those opportunities to play together, safely, obviously, but outside and enjoy the amenity.
What about, do you remember the time when they told us to put a thing over the screen to stop the whatever's coming out of the radiation?
Yeah.
That all went by the wayside, didn't it? What happened there?
Can I tell you a funny story? There was a dentist in Miami, Florida, back in the 1950s, who said he was seeing children whose teeth were poking out of their mandibles. He called it television malocclusion, because they were sitting there watching television like this. We've been afraid of technology forever. I collect these stories. Right, there was a pastor in a Journal of Leisure in the U.S., of course, where these things are crazy, and I can say that. I've been in Queensland only for 24 years, so I have a history. And this author said that when children are inside reading books, you can imagine we would let children read books, and they had their heads bent down, inside, not outside, in an abnormal, unnatural position, reading things that we don't know what they're reading. This could only lead to harm. And then when they take them to bed, they would have unhealthy thoughts. And today we're talking about that with screens. Yeah. So I think, there's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah. And we get that, what do they call that, neck?
Yeah.
It's tech neck.
Tech neck.
Yeah, there you go. So should we be fearful of technology, or is it Are we just fearful because we don't understand it, and maybe older Queenslanders, those of us who didn't, weren't born with the technology we have now, are we just fearful because we don't understand it? Yeah.
Look, I think the first rule of technology is always inspect it. Always reflect on it, which, my colleagues here have said. Always think about what it can do for you, what it can't do for you. I'm a parent. I've dealt with the struggle, particularly around Minecraft, which then I turned into building my university in Minecraft as an experiment in virtual learning environments, as you do. But the struggle is, if you're spending a lot of time in any one medium or doing any one thing, there are opportunity costs. I mean, we have gym junkies and workaholics. I think there are people who are addicted, of course, to screens, and it's unhealthy. And it's really healthy that a lot of the providers of the technologies now, mobile phone providers, for example, have software that will diagnose how much time each week you spend on your phone. And I got a new phone recently, and my time went up and up and up, and it was a really good bit of a feedback loop. And I wasn't clearing my email either.
And Deb, you've got something you were telling us about how you get off technology. You know how you have your... Not only that, but the other...
Yeah, okay. That's kind of a secret.
Oh, sorry.
We thought it was a great idea. I like to do this thing. Well, I haven't done it for a while, but I call it, it's Wednesdays at noon in my office. I can tell you where my office is if anyone needs to know. And it's called One Track Disco. And you come in, no phones, no thing, and I play a random disco track and everyone dances their asses off and then leaves.
For a whole track, 3 minutes or something.
And it's actually it's kind of a really lovely shock in the middle of the day that gets you over the hump Wednesday, and everyone always secretly thinks, that was amazing, or I was in a terrible mood, I'm now in a great mood. So there's sort of...
What about the warning you have on your computer as well?
We used to have... Oh, that too. Oh, is that what you meant? Yeah. Right. I just gave up my secret. So when I very early days in the 90s, I was a interface designer for educational games. So well early. And we used to have this thing where the screen would freeze every hour and say, get up and walk, or it would have a random message. And we'd have to do that. And we'd do that. And I kind of, all I do now is, and that's why I do the One Track Disco, is at least at one moment in the week I get up. But I tend to do that a lot more than just then. It's a good thing to do. But I remember too when I made an AR game way before Pokemon Go in 2004. I made one for galleries in Melbourne in Fed Square, and I remember this person came running up to me as I made it for families, like, grandparents to play with kids in space, to get them engaged with their own cultural artefacts, get them to engage in the museums. And someone came running up behind me and said, you're an irresponsible designer, because I was making people look at their phones in public and they were going to get bashed at the back of their head. So this was the kind of paranoia, this was 2004, right? So that wasn't that long ago. So if you think about what we've accepted in terms of public behaviour with technology from then, they thought it was dangerous in 2004. And that's changed a lot. Now when we know who's a Pokemon Go player, we know the stance, we know the look down, look up, look down, look up, look down, look up. We know that's a Pokemon Go player. So,
but there is a danger with the technology and people looking down. We've seen it. People walking around, not looking, walking out in front of a car. Yeah. We've seen that type of danger, haven't we? And also we've seen, people can track you down, can't they? Yeah. So does it mean that our safety has been compromised a little bit with technology? Deb? Or Elizabeth? Anybody?
It's not my area, but I think privacy data, I think we need to start paying more attention and caring more about that. And I definitely, I'm still surprised when I have that time when I should be doing my email, when I'm looking through my settings, because I'd rather do that on my phone, and I start to realise some of the settings that are in there that I need to pay attention to, like what my data's being shared with, or especially what app is doing what with my data. I think we need to be paying a lot better attention to that, and I think we need to have the tools. This is a sort of society issue. Otherwise, we're going to let organisations and companies who have currency in our data taking over our identities in those ways.
Look,
And I don't mean, I'm not normally like, oh, Big Brother's coming, but I think that is something I'm starting to get anxious about.
But I think Big Brother is coming, and Big Sister, the big transnational corporation. I am scared to death of Netflix. I mean, the Netflix algorithm or the YouTube algorithm that knows exactly what I like, and I really actually want to break out of of my habits sometimes and look at other things, and I don't want to be locked in, but it only gives me a few seconds and then I'm lost. And I'm very concerned about algorithmic decision making. I'm concerned about recommendations about books and then closing me off from other experiences. I know that your Google search and your Google identity, if you're a young student and you go to school, the stuff you search, if your ID is in that computer, so if it's identified you and you're logged into your Google account, your search results are constrained by the algorithm. You may not be getting the academic content you want because your search is actually being skewed to your entertainment choices. That's dreadful. And so we have to be very cautious about that.
And is it true any form you fill out is not autonomous? Like they say it's anonymous, but it's never anonymous.
Well, your IP address is right there, and if the IP address is your phone and your phone is registered to you, and you're not letting your child use your phone, then it's probably you. That's devastating, really, from a privacy perspective.
Yen, what do you think about the privacy and the safety issue? Is it something that comes into your work in design?
No, but not specifically, but I guess I do think that question of fear does come back to, like I don't know much about algorithms, to be honest, but it's that fact that we're trusting this thing that we don't fully understand. I do it all the time. I'm sure I've signed up to an app that there's a zillion pages of terms and conditions that you go, yep, fine, I've agreed. So I think that's the stuff that's generating the fear and the worry because, we don't know. We don't question it because
everyone's there, so we got to be there too, right?
Yeah.
That's the Facebook thing. Everyone's there, we got to be there. But I think for me, we need some kind of standard about that the default settings for anything you download should be closed and you add and open yourself.
Opt in, not opt out.
Yeah, so it's instead of like, exactly. I think that's a really simple thing we can start with. But I mean, the thing is too is, of course, there's a lot of positive ways to use the data too, and there's a lot of positive ways that we can help take care of each other better, knowing more about ourselves. But I'm yet to see a great example of that, to quote.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen cyberbullying being a real problem with our schools, our children. It's in the news currently. Is there a concern that more of these things will develop, or are we finally reaching the place where we are dealing with this?
Well, I think it's just going to be, it's an evolution, really, or a revolution, whichever way, wherever your interest sits in terms of how it's all unfolding. But I think, we are sort of slowly, it moves so much, technology and the development of technology moves so much faster than we can move with it. So, we're looking at all our legislation takes, a whole pile of time to catch up. So it's you usually hear all the horror stories about how we actually use technology inappropriately, before we actually then have the legislation now to actually say, hey, that's not actually what we want to do in our communities. So I think there's a lot of, it will just continue to be like that, and it is the speed of which it progresses and the way that we're sort of still struggling to keep across that, either from a legislative perspective or just simply from a human perspective in terms of how we actually deal with it personally.
There have been a lot of advances in technology, which I said before are great things. At the same time, some of that technology has changed the way we work, not only live, but the way we work, and maybe replaced some jobs. That's a negative thing, isn't it, for all concerned? And is that something that's going to continue to happen in the future, Jeff?
Well, because I talk to students about going to university and thinking about their careers, this is something, and because I'm a parent of 3 young men, it's something that concerns me greatly. I think that there's a really good book by an economist called Rutger Bregman. He's a Dutchman. He's only 28. He's published 3 amazing books, and they've made the rounds. One is called Utopia for Realists. I don't know if any of you have seen this or read this book, but it's beautifully written. And his argument is basically that we have enough wealth in the world now to support a universal minimum wage. What we then do with our lives becomes a construction based on our true desires. And it's a really interesting proposition. The fundamental basis of the proposition, though, is that extreme poverty is down to less than 10%. 10% of the world's population lives in extreme poverty. That was 40% in the 1980s. Technology has displaced a lot of work. And in the previous industrial revolutions, or revolutions on work, workers have been displaced. But it is remarkable how we have found other things for people to do. And so the jobs that my students are going to do are very different from the jobs that I was looking at when I was a student. And it's just that we find other work for us to do. Now, a lot of the World Economic Forum, for example, has said we expect that there is and this came out of actually Harvard, Osborne and Frey, there is an expectation that a 70% chance that 40% of all jobs will be gone by 2020, 2025. So we're on that precipice now. So there's probably going to be disruption over the course of the next decade, and that might be because of Twitter and leaders too, who knows. But there is an opportunity for us to look for, and I talk to my students all the time about look for the opportunity, look for the wedge, look for the need, because there's always one. And if you make yourself literate, and I've said even to politicians who say they don't have time to play video games, I've said things like, well, that you're just not literate. You don't know how to play them. And I think that's what work is about as well. If you know how to do the work that's necessary or needed, you're prepared and you will get a job. If you don't have that literacy, if you don't have those skills for the digital economy, you're in trouble.
And that would go for all age groups, obviously, because we have an older workforce as well who are fearful of ageism in the workforce. So would that be increased, do you think, because of technology and because they can't grasp it, or maybe they don't want to?
First of all, I love the auto industry, and I know there are ecological reasons not to. But when the plants closed here in Australia, down in South Australia, it was and Victoria, it was devastating because you have a whole class of workers, a whole group, a very large group of workers who have certain skill sets that haven't been prepared for the transition. And absolutely all of them would have been in their 40s and 50s and maybe in their early 60s. What's really interesting too, though, is we're starting to think about retiring the word retirement because we can do things now in our homes and find gainful work that we couldn't do before. And the biggest part of our digital economy now, I think in Australia, and what we're really good at in Queensland, and you could see it in the exhibition, is creativity and coming up with quirky, fun, amazing, functional solutions to really serious problems.
Yeah, I think that people won't have that one job for life either. There's sort of micro jobs and they'll be having multiple jobs at once. And also, if you're still working beyond retirement, people don't need to know your age or where you're doing the jobs from home or whatever. So the thing for me with students is you can prepare for your first job while you're at uni, but maybe not your second, third and fourth one. And for me, that's exciting. That's exciting. So students need to know how to remain curious, how to remain adaptable, how to know how they learn. Knowing how you learn is so critical because you have to keep doing that to change it up every now and then. So for me, teaching people how to learn is my first job, and then the other thing comes after that, because I think it's an exciting space for people to have that. But that comes from a very privileged life and a privileged way of life. So, but for me, I get quite excited about what a career will be for the future.
We've got a question on Twitter from Linda Barron. Do you think the reason kids don't go outside to play is because parents aren't demonstrating best practice? That is, parents are always busy on their device, setting that example. So, Yen, do you want to start with that answer?
Don't have kids, but I do think that's true. I definitely see that with my sisters with young kids, and that there's toys for toddlers that's a smartphone, so it's ingrained, and they know how to pick them up. And my mum doesn't really know how to use an iPad, but my 4-year-old niece will teach her how to play YouTube. So I think it's that sense that they're always around it. So yeah, I do think parents don't realise what they're teaching sometimes.
What do you think, Elizabeth?
Yeah, sure. I think look, there's a simple answer and there's a longer answer. So I think the challenge is that you know, the challenges around parenting, you know, is that we are so busy these days, and the pace of change that we're experiencing is such that I think, coming back to the play piece, I think sometimes as adults we've actually forgotten how to play. Like, so actually going outside, it means we've actually got to really exert some effort. We've got to get off our phones, which we might be using for work or social or whatever else. So as adults and parents, we've got to get off our phones. We've got to get outside, and we've got to remember how to play again. And so I know as a parent, you know, just sitting down and playing with my daughter when she was younger was something that I had to re-educate myself to do, because I'd spent all this time, you know, working and lots of times on devices and all this sort of stuff. So I think that whole sense of play as a parent, and having children to have lots of fun with, rather than actually, you know, having to provide for, or you know, the whole work piece, and the busyness that we have in our lives. I think there's, you know, an opportunity there to actually go, hey, you know, as parents, our kids need to go outside and play. So how can we actually engage with them now and go outside and play with them again, and remember what it was like to be a kid and get back into that space?
Send them a text and say, do you want to play outside?
Sometimes you've got to do what you've got to do to get their attention, right?
Let's take selfies. Deb, what about you? Do you think parents aren't, you know, showing kids the best way?
I'm not really into parent bashing, but I think there is sometimes I think I need to get out more myself, and I think definitely engaging. I mean, everyone's time poor, and so I don't really have an answer to that. I think we all need to get out more, and I think that play is a really great excuse for doing that. And I think also, if you're playing the games or know something about the games your kids are playing too, you can almost recreate them physically. You know, take the mechanic or the story and engage in that and share in that narrative life, because what the kid's engaging in a game is a narrative life. It's a storytelling space. It's all of these other places. So you need to know the characters they're dealing with, and the mechanics, and the different types of play mechanic that happens in these games that you can actually engage them with in the real space. So my answer to getting outside more is to play more digital games. Which
Play them outside.
I think is really interesting. I've just realised my next door neighbour is here. Hi, Huo. She's on and she's not seeing me yet. But we realised that we lived next door to each other. We'd lived next door to each other for 8 years before we met. Oh. Right? And I'm pretty sure you're here tonight because you saw something on Facebook, right? So this is like a really interesting thing for me about how the sort of the proximity of strangers is different to the proximity of known people online. And it's really interesting how, you know, we sometimes message each other when we're probably right next door to each other now. So it's a really interesting thing, the outdoor, indoor, digital, physical. I could make a lot of those sorts of relationships, but I think that we need to realise how they both serve each other rather than one over the other.
And just quickly, I mean, if you look through the exhibition, those videos represent a time when we were less urbanized. I mean, Brisbane was a very different city when I immigrated 24 years ago. You know, it is a much more dense city. There's a lot more high-rise living. It is not possible to play outdoors because the urban jungle is upon us. Those videos are beautiful from those old movies because they show an outdoors and a backyard, and they show parks. We've left that because of population density and technology. And so I agree with Deb. We shouldn't bash parents. We should actually help them find opportunities. And I have said from day one, one of my key interests in video games is we shouldn't just use them as a babysitting tool. It's the worst thing you can do with them. You should play. We read books with our children. We teach them to read. We should teach them to read video games and play them, and to take them outdoors and take them on the road. And when it's raining, okay, fine. But when it's sunny, go out and play.
Parents know Wiggles songs.
Yeah.
Why did they stop learning Wiggles songs? You need to know what the game version of the Wiggles is that they're all
Exactly.
doing and all of that, so that you can sing together.
And they said television used to be a babysitter, didn't they? It got blamed for that. We're going to throw it open to Q&As. Any questions at all for our panel? Anything at all? Your next door neighbour's got one. Hang on, the microphone's coming over to you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Juan from China and I live next door of Debbie for 8 years. Actually, I lived that building for 12 years. I lived there since 2006, before you come to that building.
Oh, okay.
And we accidentally met in the lift, so we know each other.
So she hasn't got one of your emails. It's about 5,032 or something on her
No.
email.
No. I text her by Facebook message. That's maximum. Because when I arrive, I'm a property sales agent. I use WeChat sell property a lot, and I use Facebook get listing, LinkedIn get listing, and I sell the luxury property and the land and business. Everything is online. And then while I come to Australia, my husband found my profile Yahoo message. He said, "Are you from China?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I'm looking for a friend from China." I said, "I have a boyfriend already." He said, "I'm just looking for a friend." I said, "Rubbish, I know you're foreigner so well." But eventually I end up coming to Australia, because I'm married to him. He's a nice guy. So I wanted to say, yeah.
It's a different kind of play.
Yeah.
He lives next door to you.
I wanted to say you don't resist about the digital, because that's a life. And in China we use we needn't bring wallet as long as we bring our mobile phone with WeChat. We use WeChat Pay, Alipay. Even people on street, they want a donation, they use two options, Alipay or WeChat Pay. Exactly, I'm no kidding.
Wow. Really? You make digital donations?
There's
Digital
my
donation.
ANZ
Also,
card.
you buy anything. They prefer you do Alipay or WeChat Pay, because instead they have to give you a cash or they give you a coin. Nobody want a coin, right? And also, you use sometimes you have to branding yourself. Like if you follow my Facebook, you will say, "I'm not just property sales agent. I'm vegetarian. I cook vegan food," so people will follow me for that. Because not everybody every day will buy property, right? Maybe most people once a life just buy one or two. In Australia, only 5% have over 3 property. Only 5% population. Yeah, so I wanted to say, you need to do something, use the digital. You can't say, "Oh, I'm too scared about people steal my information." Who are you? You're nobody. Right? Even they want to look, go ahead, pay my credit card debt. So what? That's why I wanted to
It's
say.
when you become a somebody that it becomes
That's
a
right.
problem.
You
So
were
when you're in
just-
trouble or something happens and you become a somebody, if you look at your last 5 text messages, they could be read in a very different way than you intended if you were in trouble.
Yeah,
That's
also-
what I'm a bit paranoid.
You are, aren't you?
Yeah, also the last thing is because one of the I can't remember is ABC or which interview me. I'm using WeChat for sell property, so I got lots of Aussie ask me, "Juan, how you sell property by WeChat?" I said, "Well, your database is in Australia. You have folks on Facebook or Twitter. Don't go to WeChat because you know nobody from overseas. Why we use WeChat? Because Chinese government block the Facebook, Twitter, and Google. That's why we have to use WeChat."
Yeah, someone was telling me about that just the other day. They went to China and, they couldn't message out, but they were telling me just the other day about WeChat, and that's what everybody uses over there because you've got controls on the Facebook and the other stuff. Sorry, you had a question here?
Yep. With the Internet of Things coming, I don't know if everybody knows where every device in your house is connected to the Internet. You're never going to actually divorce yourself from IT, and with the future of cars actually disappearing off our road and us having self-drive cars, well, we won't actually own self-drive cars. Self-drive cars will be hired, like your Netflix and all that sort of thing. So we're never going to actually get away from technology as such. It's always going to be there.
I think the Internet of Things is one of those promises that might never come true, because that would require the people who own all the different gadgets to work on the same protocol, and we don't see that happening very much. And what might happen then is if one person owns a network to all of the Internet of Things, that might get a bit tricky. So I'm not I think there'll be smart objects in the home, and I think that's kind of what we mean, but this thing of them all being connected, I'm not sure. But I understand the premise, and I understand that. But one of the stories I tell about the Internet of Things for me is I have a brother who is an amputee, and he constantly has trouble with needing to have his prosthetic adjusted. I imagine him getting up in the morning, and while he's having a shower, his stump is being scanned. It's sending information to the internet. It's sending information to the 3D printer. A new soft part is being printed so he can adjust it for the day, which is then sending... so I'm thinking about how those things work in the favour of well-being and self-help, so the hospitals aren't as... So I try to think of scenarios in which... And I think if we don't think of the scenarios in how they're going to be used and put the demand on them, we're just going to be delivered things. And I think that if we're not engaging in a conversation, like when virtual reality came out again in a big way in the last few years, before they went on market, they were kind of given to tinkerers and hobbyists and artists and stuff to play with first, so that they were having feedback on how they would be developed and released. So it wasn't just here, adapt, it was here, adopt. Right, so I think a lot of the times this is why I like the idea of DesFi, telling stories about the future. So we're creating the demand for how this thing will be delivered. But the Internet of Things, I think, needs to be... Everything is about personalisation and customisation of these sorts of things. So we need to find good ways to do that without using the privacy data too badly.
Another question over here? Oh, sorry, did someone want to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say, I kind of agree with that in the city sense. So looking at street poles at the Gold Coast, and they're actually owned by Energex, Main Roads in the city, and Optus and Telstra can also put on things there, which means that somebody else can't put something else up. So all that infrastructure is, like I was saying, I think it's possible, but until everyone cooperates and is on the one system, it's actually very siloed. And we saw a bit of that during games, but essentially NBN could just come in and do something totally different, and the city has no control over that. And there's this example in Toronto, I think Google won it, but it's basically a redevelopment where they're doing it as a prototype smart city. And I think it only works because there's this one person who's controlling all of the systems, so everything's working together. So I think it might happen in those sort of pockets of development, and we probably even see it now when you think about a big developer, a Mervec or whatever, where they're owning the whole thing to be able to do that. But I think it'll be really tricky to retrofit everything because government, different levels of government, and just the cooperation that takes is going to be difficult.
Yes, over here we have another question. Yep.
I was actually in Perth in May this year, and I saw a Landcorp development called Whitecomb Valley, and it was quite interesting. It's where the future of development could become. It's a 2-hectare site. Everything was about data analytics. They were collecting data about, the solar panels generating electricity on site, the water bores basically extracting water for irrigation and for non-potable uses through the development. There was a ride-share car and everything. So it was quite interesting. So it kind of leads on to what Yen was talking about. Like, it is easier to do that with newer development rather than retrofitting existing development. So it's quite interesting to see what's going to happen with the future, especially with, automated vehicles as well. I saw the trial in Perth, so it was quite interesting. But just an aside, my 1-year-old's, one of her first words was pay pass and tap. So, and it's because that's what people say. Like when you go to do a small purchase, it's like pay pass, and so she picked it up. She was only 1 when she started saying pay pass.
Okay.
It's very similar to papa. It's a papa. It's affirmative, so I'm just going to take that as a gender response.
Yes, up the back. We'll bring you the microphone. Hang on a tick.
Don't need it. Technology makes my Queensland life. Makes my Queensland life. I'm going sailing tomorrow. I'm on the weather app. I'm looking at the radar, checking the wind, doing all that. If I'm taking a boat to the Gold Coast, I'm using Navionics to navigate through the channels. Whatever I'm doing in Queensland, I'm using a lot of technology, not just weather, but I suspect it's probably the biggest
Yes.
app
yeah.
that's used anywhere anyway. But I'm doing it to facilitate my Queensland life. So I have no problem with it. It's good. I'm a little bit over 40 and I've adapted pretty well. So.
And what did you do?
The other thing is there's a little red button on your remote, Professor. If you don't like the Netflix algorithms, okay, just don't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that because you're talking. Did you say sailing? Going sailing. So I mean that is as far away from the sort of the kitchen as you get, going out to sea. So I love that story. And I think that's really interesting because I don't know why I check my weather app every morning because the weather's always the same here. But I have a lot of great stories too. Like I have students who are using virtual reality to give people with spinal cord injury an escape from the pain they're in or for mood change. We're also doing it for kids in hospital. When they put the VR on, their room fills with water, their bed becomes a boat, and other boats on the ocean are other kids in other hospitals all around the world that they play games with. And that comes from the fact that kids who went to hospital used to go into rooms with 8 in a room. Now they're in a room for clinical reasons on their own. So there's isolation, there's anxiety, and we want to turn their hospital into a sailing experience so that they might look forward to it, or we're trying to change their story of their experience through that, which I think is really important. And we're also using virtual reality. People go into a virtual biolab using plant development concepts. They design their own fruit, which then they send to a 3D printer from the virtual reality, which prints in an edible material with the nutrition they're missing. So there's great stories that are very provocative, like when you do these kind of future version prototypes, they're very provocative. They raise a lot of problems as well as solutions, but as long as we're doing them and we're seeing it positively and we've got some agency in the positive story of technology, I think it becomes very powerful and quite interesting about how it serves others as well as ourselves.
And I would observe, too, that if you take something like Google Earth, and don't get me wrong, I am not anti-technology. As I said at the very beginning, I quite love all of my tech, and I have, a watch that has my credit card, and that's all I take when I go walking on Miami Beach every Sunday morning at sunrise. So it's just, I don't need a phone because it's, I have that if I need it for an emergency, and it also checks my heart rate that I'm not overdoing it. But with respect to the affordances, if I play a flight simulator, I can learn about a topography of a country. Before I ever came to Australia, knowing that I was coming to Australia, I actually flew over the country in a Microsoft Flight Simulator. This was before the days of Google Maps and Google Earth. Now, if you've lived in multiple parts of the world, as I have, take Google Earth and start looking at all the places you've lived and watch the flood of memories. As a memory aid, it's a remarkable tool. So I hear you, and I agree completely.
Any other questions before we wrap up? One more, okay. Yeah, if you go in the lifestyle exhibition now, you'll see all those memories. I just want to go back there though.
So this isn't something that I do. I hear about it from friends, and it sort of stunned me when I heard about it. There's this thing called geocaching, which they say you wouldn't be able to do it without the technology that we have today. To be able, it's kind of like Pokemon Go for adults.
Scavenger hunt using a GPS.
Yes, exactly. Before, it would have been something that was advertised in the newspaper. So you might wait for a weekly advert in the classifieds to say, this is where to go to next. But now it's got that immediacy. And the people I know who do it, they travel so far around southeast Queensland. They find things in southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales that the average person wouldn't even know was there, because they're looking for a Tupperware box that's got
a Barbie doll in it.
Yeah.
Or you swap a Barbie doll for a Band-Aid. Or, they're called caches that are hidden somewhere. Yeah, it got me outdoors. I love it. I went to Bribie Island for the first time looking for a geocache. But the interesting thing about geocache, I'm so glad you brought that up, was not only does it get people out to search for these treasures, people tell the story of the find online, but you can't give away, you can't spoil where it is. So there's all these rules that are self-governed on that community. But another thing that happened though was there was a thing where a lot of people were doing it in parks in LA, and they were called geo-trashers because they were hiding things across, they were walking over planters and stuff to find these things or to hide them in places, which became a problem. But some artists did this thing where they put some geocaches in Compton, and they realised that people who were geocaching were people who had fancy mountain bikes and fancy GPS. So they challenged them to go and find a cache in local stores, and they had to report by telling a story about a conversation with a local. So it made them go to an area that would never cross the threshold. So I call it a threshold crosser. So if you can use these sort of location games to cross thresholds that you wouldn't normally go to and have experiences with people you don't normally do, I just loved the idea that geocaching just provided this really lovely just infrastructure that people took it on in their own ways. But I remember going in cars in the 70s, and you'd end up in car rallies.
And you'd have to go into some shop and get a box of matches or something. I'm just going to finish off by asking each one of you just quickly, well, the Queensland lifestyle, screen, sunshine, has technology changed the Queensland lifestyle, and do you think it's better or for worse? Jeff?
I think it's better. I mean, I have to agree with the gentleman in the back. I think we have more opportunities to enjoy the outdoors. We have more affordances. We have more safety as a result, and surety to some degree. But I also think that Queensland offers something that many parts of the world don't, and that is that sunshine. I think we'll keep using it, and we'll keep perhaps abusing it. Hopefully we protect it over time. And please, can we not, we should retrofit old buildings. We shouldn't kill Queenslanders for high rises.
Yes. Deb?
I would say my lifestyle, like my social lifestyle, is definitely improved by technology, but I do find a lot of anxieties with technology at work and the workload that it brings with it. So I do have, sometimes I just want to wipe my digital slate clean. But other than that, I do love what digital brings us in terms of being able to share stories with each other more than anything.
And what it will bring in the future. Yeah. Elizabeth?
I think Queensland is actually uniquely placed because of the sunshine that we have, and I think the more that technology, that we do have more technology in our lives, there's more opportunities where people will actually want to get back to nature. They'll want to get outside, and I just think we're in such a great place to still retain that humanity that that's still always going to be part of that, no matter what our technology is about.
And Yen?
Yeah, I kind of agree with that last point. I mean, definitely agree that technology makes our lifestyles better, but I mean, we're human, and a tree and sunshine and all this really basic stuff will always be important. So I think that will ultimately kind of trump.
Yeah, don't mention the name Trump. Please thank our panellists this evening. Thank you so much. Jeff Brand, Elizabeth Hughes, Deb Paulson, Yen Tren. And thank you all for coming along as well. And please do take a look in the lifestyle exhibition if you just go through. I think it's going to be open till about 8 o'clock tonight. So really worth having a look. Won't take you long to get around, and you'll really love those old photos and memories. They're just fabulous. And so we need to get out surfing the waves, not just the net, but back to surfing the waves at the beach as well. Thanks everybody for coming.